If you've seen the Wicked movie and cannot get enough and want to understand more about the world of Wicked and why things are the way they are, without spoiling part 2 that should come out next year, then this video is for you. Right off the bat, this video does contain some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the Wicked movie yet, or read the book, or watched the play, and you're wanting a spoiler-free experience, you might want to click off now. Hi Peaches, it's Shaaba, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for clicking on another video. As you may have seen across my socials, I was lucky enough to be invited to the Wicked premiere. Firstly, I would not be able to have any of these opportunities if it wasn't for this gorgeous community, so really, truly, thank you very much from the heart of my bottom. And ever since that moment, I've been holding on, wanting to talk about Wicked. I thought it was only fair to give it a little bit of time whilst it's been out, so that everybody who was really keen was able to watch it, but I can't wait anymore. And so, without further ado, here are some of my thoughts on Wicked. First, let me say the hype is real. It is all the world is talking about. I'm actually filming this on Wicked Day, Wicked release day, which in the UK is Friday the 22nd of November. And if you two are being inundated with Wicked paraphernalia, propaganda, if you will, across all your socials, if it's all anybody's talking about, then you might be feeling like, oh, I'm not the biggest theatre kid. Maybe this movie, maybe this video isn't for me. Let me just say, this video and the Wicked movie is for you. If you want to, go watch it. You don't need to have read the books. You don't need to have seen the theatre show. You certainly don't need to have seen it millions and millions and millions of times. Just go and have fun and ignore the super hardcore Wicked lore fans who are just being snobby, to be fair, and are forgetting that art like this is supposed to be for everyone. Now, I have to admit, I am not a super invested Wicked lover. I have not read the book before I'd gone to see the movie. I certainly hadn't seen it a bajillion times in theatre, and I could not recite every single lyric to every single song. Something about gravity, yeah, sure, but beyond that, Elphaba who? I can see why people are so invested though, especially because the origins of Wicked are quite unusual and incredibly complex. The whole world is made in steps and not by the same people, and that absolutely fascinated me. So in my typical Shaaba fashion, I did a lot of research about it, and I'm going to give you the quick rundown. The birth of Wicked predates Wicked. It will make sense, bear with, and it started way back in the year 1900. That is like very old, with the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy, Tin Man, Scarecrow, Lion, yep, that Wizard of Oz, and that Wicked Witch, the one that's like, I'm melting, I'm melting! Fun fact, in the original novel, the Wicked Witch wasn't even green, and she didn't have a name. Elphaba who?
You're not green. WTF.
The movie The Wizard of Oz then came out nearly 40 years later in 1939, and it was actually the movie that made the Wicked Witch green. The movie actually did a number of groundbreaking things, specifically to do with cinematography and with colour. I rewatched it recently, and there's a specific scene where Dorothy comes out of her house after the tornado happens, and everything is like sepia toned and brown and one colour, and she opens the door and then there's just this like foof. I don't know what that sound effect was, but foof! Explosion of colour everywhere, which was quite the front-runner move for its time. That's not to say, just to note that the movie's production quality and processes should be absolutely adored. 1939 was a long time ago, and it's come out that a number of the practices were quite problematic, particularly to do with the actors used in Munchkinland, who are not treated very kindly, and child labour laws because Judy Garland was a child, and also reported to have been incredibly overworked. That is not the purpose of this video. I've lost my bean. The witch is green. That's where we were going with that. But if you happen to be one of the very few people who did not grow up with the story of the Wizard of Oz, I won't go through the whole plot. Essentially, Dorothy is in her house, it's caught up in a twister, she lands in Oz and wants to make her way back to Kansas.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Glinda, the good witch, who isn't always called Glinda, gives Dorothy red ruby shoes and tells her to follow the yellow brick road to the Wizard of Oz, who will be able to help her get back home. The green witch does not like this one bit. No, she wants those shoes. And Dorothy actually ends up killing her with a bucket of water, because it turns out that the green witch is allergic to that. Literally melts her entire body. She's gone. No more. The cherry on top of the cake is that when Dorothy does see the wizard, turns out he's an entire phony. He has no magical powers whatsoever, and Dorothy makes her own way home instead. It's a classic. Everybody's at least heard of the story of the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy, the red shoes, the yellow brick road, Dodo. One guy, Gregory Maguire, who was a children's author at the time, really loved the story. In the early 90s, which is when he was writing, a murder actually happened in London. It's pretty well known, it's in the papers, and the reason being is because both the criminals and the victim were children. Everyone was asking, how on earth could young kids do this? Like, how could they be just so inherently evil? And it was from that Gregory was inspired and had a bit of a revelation. Dark times. He made a connection that in children's books, the villains are always super one-dimensional. We never really truly understand why they're doing what they're doing, like in the Wizard of Oz. And so he decided to create this entire world, this entire story that kind of wraps around the Wizard of Oz. It's a prequel. It's also kind of happening alongside Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz's storyline, and also a little bit after too, all to give the Wicked Witch some depth. And he even even gave her a name, Elphaba, which Maguire actually based on the original author of The Wizard of Oz's initials, Elphaba, the way that it's pronounced. See? Elphaba. It's like magic. Side quest, because this was definitely one of my thoughts. Legally, is Maguire able to do this? If he didn't make The Wizard of Oz in the first place, did he get permission from Lyman in order to make this, like, spin-off? It's not really a spin-off, because it's also kind of incorporating the storyline. Like, how? What? Because Lyman was born in 1956, and the timelines, they're not timelining, you know? Their lives never crossed. Turns out Maguire didn't have to. Based on copyright laws, The Wizard of Oz was so old, the novel that is, not the film, had become public domain, and so in 1995, Gregory wrote Wicked, The Life and Death of the Wicked Witch in the West. A very good read. There are 3 follow-up books too that have come out since, all the way into the 2010s. I'm not going to go into the plot because hopefully you have seen the movie at this point if you're watching this video, but there are some pretty big differences, like huge differences between the books and the play that are not good, they're not bad, they're just kind of notable. Mark Platt, the producer, really wanted to make Wicked into a movie, but Stephen Schwartz, a friend of his who also happened to be a pretty banging composer, was like, you know what, I think Wicked needs to be a play first, and so the musical was born. Which brings us to today. Now it's the movie, directed by John Chu, and whilst, as I've hopefully explained, the origins of Wicked are actually quite complex and multi-layered and not all by the same people, it's quite important to note that the movie definitely seems to follow the play, not the book. I think a lot of people who really love the book might be disappointed in just how different the book is, like how far detached the movie has gone from the original narrative of the Wicked Witch. As we often see with a lot of IP that is turned into multimedia projects, the book is definitely darker. It's a lot more detailed, a lot more complex, it's a lot more kind of earthier and definitely more tragic. I feel like I'm just using different adjectives to describe tragedy at this point. It's sad. It's really sad. But does the fact that the show and the movie are so different to the book make it bad? I personally don't think so. My view is that because Wicked as a book was built in a way that was inspired by another project and added to and changed, it kind of just seems within its nature that other renditions made later and by other people would end up doing the exact same thing. I don't think it's a criticism, but I also don't think that we should just skim over the differences because they are quite notable, even down to the core themes that the narratives are trying to portray. So I thought we'd like untangle that a little bit. So what are the most apparent themes in the book? The main one I think is quite obvious, right? It's this idea of being either for good or from evil. More specifically, what happens when society deems you to be evil without much consideration? It is a super interesting concept that I think hits a little too close to home right now with what society is going through. Even today, nearly 100 years after Wicked's origin, we still haven't seemed to fix the issue of group and herd mentality and piling on and not being fully informed before we open our silly little mouths. With so much culture war, people on every side, every facet, every corner feels like they're very misunderstood. I'm not here to talk about whether they are wrong or right, I'm just noting that perception can be a really tricky thing, especially when that's a mass perception and you feel like you no longer have power and freedom and autonomy over your choices. The second biggest theme, quelle surprise, is propaganda and politics. Wicked is definitely up there as one of the most political storylines of all time. Maguire stated when writing Wicked actually that he specifically searched and looked for propaganda that he could find around World War II and Hitler. Manipulative communication and the effects of people opposed to war absolutely made its way into the book. And you can see that in the overriding plot, which some may argue, and I would not necessarily disagree, is not the overriding plot of the movie. In the book, the overriding plot and the reason that Elphaba goes to see the wizard is political. This desire that she has straight from the offset is all about being an animal rights activist, not as a movie and show portrays it because she doesn't want to be green. That's probably the biggest difference, which I don't think we can just sweep over. It is kind of like the main point of the film. I find that difference really fascinating. That being said, the issue of how they treat the animals is still apparent in the movie. It's just downplayed quite a bit. The final big theme of the book seems to be this sense of purpose. This idea of being dedicated to a cause that matters so much to Elphaba that she risks her life, experiences total exile, and lives on the run for years and never really gets her name cleared, all in the name of this animal rights issue that she's fighting so hard for. This strong moral compass, and none of those are spoilers, by the way, for the movie, because like in the very first scene when Ariana comes down in a little bubble,
she wore a crown and she came down in a bubble, dog.
the dead and the witches and the bad, she's portrayed as bad. I did not ruin that for you. It's funny because before knowing the book and only watching the movie, I would say the main themes are, yes, this idea of good, evil, the perception of evil, for sure. Animal rights and politics, yeah, it's in there, but I definitely say that the overriding theme above the animal rights and the politics and the propaganda is girl power. The relationship portrayed between Elphaba and Glinda is beautiful. It's incredible, it's endearing, and it is not really what we see in the book. Glinda in the shows is more of a main character. She definitely has main character syndrome.
Good to see me, isn't it?
Especially compared to the book, where her role is more supporting in nature. I don't know, maybe my view on what I saw in the Wicked movie is biased by what we're going through in the world at the moment. Feminism was right up there as a theme for me. More so than the animal rights. I've actually seen a number of reviews saying that, oh, well, you know, this whole thing about the animals, this whole thing about Nessa Rose, who is Elphaba's younger sister, who happens to be in a wheelchair, and coincidentally is the only reason that Elphaba is at Shiz in the first place. They're like, oh, yeah, could have done without that. Not necessary. Not needed. Is it silly and a little bit ignorant to see? Yes, but also, this is only Act 1 of the movie. It's the first half of the story, and I definitely feel that the role of Nessa is explored a lot more in the second. Having to wait a year for that? Rude. Give it to us now. Despite these differences, I don't hate that the shows are such a departure from the book, though. And I think a large part of that comes down to the fact that although it's taken an alternative route, it's done it really well. There is nothing wrong with elevating the theme of feminism, and I'm just gonna say it. I think Wicked is one of, if not the most feminist movie I have ever seen. Should we test it? There are a lot of different mechanisms to judge feminism in movies, one of the most well-known being the Bechdel test. For those of you who might not know, the Bechdel test has 2 criteria points and 1 bonus one that is sometimes included. The first is that 2 women are speaking to each other. Not a man and a woman, not a dog and a cat, 2 women. And the second is that they're talking to each other about something other than a man. Now you would think that a lot of movies would be able to pass this, but surprisingly...
Don't you just love it?
Love what?
Tiffany's.
You've been officially labelled a disturber of the peace.
Not often enough, in my opinion.
$10 says you're wrong.
You better hold on tight, spider monkey.
It's quite surprising to see how few scenes do. This third little bonus rule also sometimes requires the women to be named characters, because again, perhaps unsurprisingly, a lot of women, specifically in older media, are not named people. They're not fleshed out enough, they're not developed enough, people don't care about them enough to give them a name. The Green Witch in The Wizard of Oz being an example, right? Wicked does actually pass the Bechdel test quite a bit. Here are the percentages for Act 1 and Act 2. These statistics are of course from the theatre shows because the second movie isn't out yet. But I would be really intrigued to see the updated version of these statistics when that movie does come out, to see if it follows a similar pattern. So 21 to 22%, pretty cool, especially considering there was a love interest who was a man. And Elphaba's overriding goal is to see the wizard, who again is a man, and she's also then trying to help a goat who is also a man. Recently though, I came across a new feminism in movie metric that I got really excited about. See, I got stuck in a little YouTube wormhole, as you do, and I found a creator, Verity, who proposed the idea of the Miss Honey gender spectrum. I'll link the video downstairs in the description box. You should totally give it a watch if you're interested. The only one tiny thing that I'd want to clarify with you now is that although Verity calls it the Miss Honey gender spectrum, it's really the Miss Honey gender expression spectrum. Just keep that in mind, and of course, unlike most things that I reference, this is not peer reviewed, it is not coming from a study, it is coming from a YouTuber, but I think it's hella cool, bro. Essentially, Verity says that this gender spectrum encompasses how films often portray women. It's based on the idea of Miss Honey from the iconic film Matilda. Over here on one end of the spectrum, we have another very iconic Matilda character, the Trunchbull. She is the total opposite of what comes to mind when you think femininity. Then over here on the other end of the spectrum, you have Matilda's mama, who yes, takes this idea of femininity, but stretches it so far that it becomes absolutely unpalatable. We're talking blonde, we're talking bimbo vibes, we're talking boobs, we're talking blue eyes. What did that sound like? I'm looking for a man in finance. Huh? Never mind. And then right here, sitting perfectly in the middle, is Miss Honey. Feminine enough to be beautiful without calling too much out, but edgy enough to still have a cause whilst being palatable, as long as Daddy approves. That is the vibe that it's giving. Verity even applied the spectrum to the Barbie movie, which shook my mind, because as I'm sure you're well aware if you're watching this video and are sort of interested in movies, that Barbie holds a message of feminism at its core. To clarify, I still think that Barbie is a great movie and hugely feminist, especially to the 60% of people who really only marginally grasped the concept of feminism at its very basics. No shade, but we also of course need to remember that the movie was made by a business and there's only so much pro-sociality that capitalism will allow. Sasha in particular though, who's seen as this Gen Z feminist who really puts Barbie in her place. You know, in that scene where Barbie comes across to the playground, she's like, look, I don't think you're Barbie, but if you do, you are what's wrong with the world.
You've been making women feel bad about themselves since you were invented. You represent everything wrong with our culture. Sexualized capitalism. Look at yourself.
Verity points out that as the movie progresses, Sasha's sense of femininity definitely seems to get more honeyfied through these subconscious measures like the way that she dresses over time. Super interesting. We're not here to talk about Barbie though, we are here to talk about Wicked. And I think if you pick up the spectrum and you apply it to the Wicked movie, the characters don't really alter. Elphaba over on this side, very mistrunchable, very the patriarchy, I'm green and everybody hates me. Cynthia Erivo, who plays Elphaba, has been very vocal about protecting the aesthetic choices of her character to make sure that all components, down to the shoes on her feet, really fit Elphaba's story, and she does not get mishoneyfied at all. Similarly, our good old gal pal Glinda, played by Ariana Grande, is so superficial and so egotistical and so focused on her looks. The typical thing that we see on the opposite side of the spectrum, and again, she doesn't really move. There's even a literal makeover scene to a song called Popular, where Glinda the Pink Gumball makes over Emo Green Queen, and neither of them change one bit. I legit had a tear. I do not cry often at movies, but this movie got me twice. That was one of them. It was so beautiful. Glinda's out there, looking through her makeup, looking at all of her shoes, going through all of her dresses, being like, I'm gonna make you popular, and does absolutely nothing but give her a flower and look at her so sincerely and tell her that she is beautiful, just as she is. And if that isn't true feminism, if that is not uplifting and finding your inner power, Glinda does make two aesthetic changes to Elphaba. She gives her a hat, which, let's be honest, although iconic, does not make Elphaba more conventionally attractive. And she also gives Elphaba a cape, which,
No capes!
if you know, you know. That end scene of the movie there, it's all like, it's dramatic. She is the drama for sure, but again, not necessarily more feminine. Go Wicked. Another feminist power move from Wicked, Morrible. And again, the book plot is quite different. In the movie, Morrible takes a special shining to Elphaba because she's special, she's powerful, she's a diamond in the rough. She has this talent that no one else has that's not within her control, and that's what makes her be seen. But there's no such diamond quality in the book, which I think is quite cool. Still though, in both the shows and the book, Morrible is running the goddamn show. And more so than the wizard, it seems. She's making the announcements, she's finding the people to read the Grimoire. She is the one speaking to the monkeys, and Michelle Yeoh, she does it well. Okay, another super feminist moment in this movie that I loved was the Oz ball. Not that scene. That was the second time that I cried. When you see Elphaba's little tear and Glinda's like caressing her cheek and they're both just like united in all of that stigma. I swear, I turned to Jamie and there was a glisten. It's definitely up there as one of the most powerful movie moments. But no, the feminist moment that I'm talking about is when Fiyero speaks to Glinda. And he's like, Elphaba doesn't care what anybody thinks. And she's like, don't be dumb. Of course she does. That small interaction is so meaningful because I'm pretty sure it's something that every single person watching that movie will be able to relate to, and it lends itself to this overarching theme that we see across all of the Wicked mediums, which is that stigma exists. And more than perception and aesthetic, whether it's being caged, whether it's being an animal, whether it's being green, whether it's being heckled in any way for being different. Society is really good at coming together with a common goal of hate. It's horrifying and morbidly oppressive that a story written nearly 100 years ago is still so relatable to today. And my final point of femininity with Wicked is intersectionality, baby. When we try to picture feminism, it is always feminism with a privilege. It's white, able-bodied feminism, and that is just not the case for the majority of the world. It's Reese Witherspoon in Legally Blonde doing her thing, and Wicked is definitely not that. And not just because Elphaba is played by a black person painted green. Though on that point, with the movie's initial plot of her not wanting to be green, the movie shows us that desire through a song where the light flicks and you see like a split second of Elphaba being black. And to the idiots being like, but on Broadway, she's played by a white woman, she's green. And if we're really talking about changing character colours, in the book, Fiyero is dark-skinned. He is not white. To the point that Glinda expresses she wouldn't date Fiyero because of his skin colour. So kindly be quiet. Anyway, back to my intersectionality point. There is so much diversity in this movie. I think because I live in a predominantly white society, it's something that my eyes are kind of like trained to look out for. But there were so many people of colour. Eastern Asian people, black people, in cast and crew. I will be honest, I didn't see a South Asian person, but there was so much to take in from the first time watching that movie. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, it's just not something I picked up on first time around. If you watching this video did notice South Asian extra cast, please do let me know. Beyond race as well, we also have disability being really well represented. I say this questionably right now because without giving away any spoilers for the second half of the movie, I am really intrigued to see how they work on the plot of that. Nessa Rose, Elphaba's younger sister, is in a wheelchair and she is not the only one. It's really refreshing to see, and it's also pretty cool that Nessa Rose talks about being the first actress who actually uses a wheelchair to play the role. I think the reason that intersectionality is covered so well is because this idea of individuality has been integral to the making of Wicked in all of its forms. I remember seeing this reel, I'll try and find it, of the musical costume designer who was going through the uniforms of all of the actors that play in the Wicked cast, and every single one was different, which you don't expect from a uniform, right? They were all the same colour palette, they featured similar patterns, yet there was a real emphasis on asymmetricality. Some skirts would go up to down, some of the necklines were too sewn together. I'm also pretty sure that in the movie, some of the cast were wearing outfits that really defied what you would see of gender norms, as in uniforms that had both trousers with skirts over the top. And again, I might be recalling that wrong. There was a lot to take in on the movie, and the bit that I'm thinking about is specifically when they're doing the little dance in the library. But please, if you noticed anything that could contribute towards a conversation, let me know downstairs in the comment section. I'd love to know. Okay, to end this video, away from the politics, away from the sense of education, there were some fun little nuggets from the movie that I really wanted to talk about. Enjoying a film is a wonderful experience, but being able to talk about those little nuggets that you love so much afterwards is equally as wonderful. I have 5 little ooh nuggets. If you have ooh nuggets of your own, pop them downstairs. Let's have a chat. My first one was the Easter eggs, especially the ones in the musicality. They were so beautiful. The first time I noticed it within this gorgeous score, there was this tiny little melodic detail that was like, "Sun over the rainbow." It was so beautiful. And I turned to Jamie to be like, "Did you hear that?" By the second I did that, it had gone. They were so subtly ingrained. It's very clever. It's very sneaky. Just enough to be a little brain scratchy, itchy, good, pleasant moment, but not so much that you can really tell, and it means you have to watch it again. Okay, random thought. Ooh, nugget number 2. Should Wicked have been gay? But really though, I hear there's a lot of fanfic out there, and I do not typically have this thought, although I'm a member of the LGBT community. I know, LGBT people like to claim many things, but I was right there. The ways in which they brought Elphaba and Glinda so close. I understand there's a lot of fanfic out there already from the musical. It's only gonna expand. The room sharing, the vulnerability, the "you're beautiful." That line, oh! I'm excited to see other people's take on it, but honestly, and perhaps controversially, I feel like they did the right thing by not making this LGBT, because this rendition, this movie, is such a fantastic example of platonic love and friendship. And again, no spoilers for number 2, but even still, what we've seen already is very hoes before bros. In fact, the man that Elphaba is most infatuated with, at least in the movie, it's different in the book, is the wizard, in a totally non-romantic way, which is very important. And even then, well, I mean, we know what Elphaba thinks of the wizard by the end of the film. Alright, random thought, ooh nugget number 3. The characters are all pretty unlikable, right? Like, it's not just me. I think apart from Elphaba, they're all like surprisingly mean, and that goes for the books and the shows. The 2 that really took me by surprise were Bok and Nessa. I do understand Nessa the tiniest bit, as in why she might be troubled. Though again, fun fact, in the book it's really different. The mum doesn't die giving birth to Nessa. There's even a 3rd sibling, a little brother. But it still really took me by surprise to see just how mean Nessa was, and Bok too. Like, what are you both doing? Nessa, help your sister out. Bok, don't be such a weed. Okay, random thought number 4, my little ooh nugget. It may be controversial, and please let me say this first. I like Jonathan Bailey. I like Jonathan's portrayal, but I don't particularly love the character, and I don't think he's really needed in the way that he's packaged in the movie. Again, it's very different to the book, where Fiyero is married and actually has multiple kids. I think where some other people were saying that Nessa and the animal rights issues could have been removed, I think this edition of Fiyero, the version that we got that was like this dual love interest, this kind of love chevron triangle thing that was going on, that definitely could have been toned down. Having said that, I did quite like, I think, I'm in like 2 minds about the meaning of his song, and the choreography, the bookography was unbelievable. There's a specific couple of seconds where he's like, I don't know how else to describe this, caressing a student with his foot. He kind of sits down and he pushes him back and he brings him back, and then he's standing up and his feet are on 2 books and he slides and he doesn't fall over. That was a real magic. Elphaba step aside. But I think this is a one area where I'd have been grateful to see a little bit more of the book portrayal, where Fiyero really is Elphaba's love interest and Glinda's like not really in that picture. And as I mentioned before, Fiero's dark skin, so maybe I'm feeling some kind of way as well well about that. I think it was a really interesting choice. I don't think it was maliciously led at all, because there is so much diversity and intersectionality in this movie. And I will say, for the version of Fiyero that we got in this movie, Jonathan did do a really great job. Okay, and my final ooh nugget, my brain itchy moment that made me feel equal amounts of ew, and also, oh my god, this is the most incredible piece of cinema I've seen in a very long time, was Elphaba's prophecy. Quite near the beginning of the movie, where she's like running through this field, she's talking about the wizard and eye, she says, I know. Talk about manifesting, babe. People are gonna be celebrating, and my name has something to do with that. And that level of forecasting made me feel equal amounts of uneasy and awe. That's it. That is the thought. I have nothing critical to say. I just thought it was great. So there you go, my 5 ooh nuggets, my 5 little thoughts. If you look at all the reviews, this is one of the highest rated movies, and certainly the highest rated musical movie, and I think it's thoroughly deserved. As a movie in its own right, I don't think I can meaningfully fault it. Perhaps a bold thing to say after one watch. I definitely want to watch it again very soon. The feelings, the vibes, the portrayal, the visual grandeur, and the nuances, I'm excited to do just that. Let me know your thoughts, Peaches. Did you enjoy it? Do you have any ooh nugget moments? Have you read the book? Do you think you're gonna? However you're contributing downstairs in the comment section, just remember to be kind. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will catch you next time with another video. Be kind and have a great day. Bye!